Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. With episode 623 of your favorite professional wrestling podcast. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, and it is Thursday, so you know exactly what that means. We are here to break down everything that happened over the last week across NXT and AEW, and it was quite a busy week. Not only did we have night one of NXT Great American Bash, we also had 6 hours of AEW programming to discuss not only Dynamite Collision and Rampage as usual, but Battle of the Belts as well. So this is going to be another loaded edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast, and we're not going to waste any time off the top. Allow me to remind you that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
So please head on over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast and follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. You can also send in questions and comments for the show via Twitter at Getting Overcast, and we will read them right here on the program. Please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You will get instant reaction audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling for every major American television show, and exclusive news posts published every Friday. Not only all of that, your contributions, your subscription directly supports the continuation of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast, which has been completely free since its start and ad-free for the vast majority, 99.9% of episodes. So please support us over at buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. With that said, let's dive right into today's show. There is a ton going on in the sports entertainment world. Obviously, the Olympics are taking up a lot of everyone's time. Yours truly is barely sleeping with the amount of sports coverage I've had to be doing over the last week, and certainly moving into the next week as well. WWE SummerSlam is this coming Saturday. We have an Ultimate Preview podcast episode. If you have not already listened to it, is waiting for you in the podcast feed. And of course, this coming Saturday, as soon as WWE SummerSlam goes off the air, we will have an instant analysis podcast, which will hit your feed as soon as possible after that show. Now, we are going to be talking NXT and AEW coming up.
But I'm afraid I've got some news.
And it's going to be one item for each brand to kick things off quickly regarding those big NXT signees that we've been talking about. I'm hearing that Stephanie Vaquer's debut is relatively imminent. That was the term that was utilized, while Julia announced in Japan that her last match there is going to be August 19th. Now, NXT No Mercy is set for September 1st. So she could technically show up there the next day on August 20th and get 2 weeks of NXT television before fighting potentially Roxanne Perez for the NXT women's title at that show. They could also book it where Roxy has a surprise opponent at No Mercy, and then just Julia debuts at that show in Denver. That seems more likely, given she's going to need time to move to the United States, set up her apartment, all that good stuff. The other option is they go with Vaquer challenging Perez first, and the big Julia match is saved for Halloween Havoc in October. But I do know WWE has been anxious to get the title around Julia so they can progress Roxy forward. We'll see what happens, but I'll tell you this, Perez this week did as quality heel work as she's done since changing character. So I'm not in a huge rush to see her lose the title. That's just me speaking personally. The more significant story this week came Wednesday morning before Dynamite. Obviously, just coincidental timing, not. That Shane McMahon had a private meeting with Tony Khan at a Dallas area airport on Monday. The obviously planted photo with Wrestle Talk and report from Fightful states they discussed possibilities moving forward. It's interesting the way this whole thing transpired. My understanding is that Jim Ross mentioned Shane on one of his podcasts, just kind of in an offhand manner with no talks ever having actually occurred between the parties. The internet exaggerated that mention by JR to assume that there was actual mutual interest or something further to say when there really wasn't. Then apparently Shane and Mercedes Moné bumped into each other at an airport like a month ago. Again, seemingly random. So this appears almost like the manifestation of some happenstance stuff, unless you believe that AEW had the presence of mind to have JR randomly mention Shane's name on a podcast, hope it got picked up, and so on and so forth, which I personally do not. You can be sure the photo that was made to look leaked was not leaked, but it was planted. Then, either right before or during Dynamite, again, my timing is all off because of the Olympics. I don't know what's happening when or where or what day. I guess Bully Ray texted Shane to find out more about what's going on. And Shane replied that they were connected, he and Tony, through a mutual friend. They had a great meeting where they talked about many things, but mostly their shared love for wrestling and what it's like to work with family. Shane also said he looks forward to seeing how Tony and AEW evolve the business moving forward. That kind of statement makes it seem like the entire deal is much ado about nothing. But let me share my take on this before Shane said anything. I found it to be super interesting. Now, I have zero interest in Shane actually wrestling, nor should any of you. But the idea of a notable McMahon even appearing once on a competing wrestling program, regardless of the purpose or the usage, it is so crazy to even consider that I almost want it to happen just for the absurdity and the hilarity. My other thought on the matter is, look, Shane's a smart guy, right? And he knows exactly what he's doing here. Remember, he was extricated from WWE following that Royal Rumble bullshit. That was Vince McMahon's call, his father. I'm not aware of there being a major rift with Stephanie or Paul Levesque, and those I asked were not aware of anything like that either. But it stands to reason that he might have wanted to be around during WrestleMania like his sister and was perhaps rebuffed from that. Maybe he feels jilted, though you'll remember that he took himself out of WWE initially, actually 2 different times, to pursue other interests. Point being, this could be a leverage play of some kind. That seems to be the most plausible reason, and even if nothing else comes of this, just doing the meeting benefits AEW because it gave the brand at least a shred of attention. What I find hysterical about it, though, is the sheer hypocrisy from the part of Khan, and more so than him, AEW fans. This is a guy in Tony who called WWE the Weinstein of professional wrestling on national television. He has since said that he would love to work with WWE on a mutual card, which of course would never happen, so he can say that, but why would he want to work with the Weinstein of professional wrestling on anything? He and his fan base have been spending the last year plus saying all of WWE, all of their executives, everyone that has ever been an executive is bad because they had to know what Vince McMahon was doing behind the scenes. They said Levesque and Stephanie definitely knew. How could they not? They're not just employees, they're family. Well, if that's the case, then how could Shane not have known? Separating the parties as bad and good because one of them might be interested in working with AEW is the hypocritical part I'm talking about here. It's also immensely illogical. Ultimately, I don't know what the motivation would be from Shane to actually appear on AEW TV, but even if he does feel jilted that WWE won't take him back, I repeat that he took himself out of the company in the first place. And beyond that, there's no putting the cat back in the bag once you make a move like that. This is not a Martha Hart situation where she has no desire to ever be involved with WWE in any way, shape, or form the rest of her life. Don't forget, Shane has been getting blown up and injured every single time he gets in the ring. He's also been extremely rough and out of breath on the mic every single time we've seen him over the last 5 years. You remember what happened at WrestleMania. You remember what happened in the Braun Strowman feud. So I'm not sure whether actually doing something together, Shane and AEW, is ultimately worthwhile for either side at the end of the day, outside of doing a one-time shock factor, which it absolutely would be should he ever appear on AEW television. So that's my piece on Shane McMahon and AEW. Let's move on to the rest of the show. We're going to kick things off with NXT Great American Bash. We will then move to AEW. As always, we will have timestamps in the episode description. So if you wish to jump around, you have that option. But as always, I hope you listen to the entire show. So starting with NXT Great American Bash, obviously notable. The women had 4 of 6 matches on this show, and it was a great episode of NXT. Funny how that happens. Every single time the women dominate the show, it ends up being a fantastic episode. NXT opened with Hank and Tank playing like 90s movie heist heroes breaking in to the WWE Performance Center so they could become hosts of Great American Bash. Did they consider just asking someone? That's all they really needed to do. It was among the corniest segments NXT has done since 2.0 ended, and yet you couldn't help but smile at the stupidity of the entire thing. You know what I mean? It was just dumb fun. Also, the ropes were red, white, and blue, which looked cool, and I really wouldn't hate if WWE went back to those. I know they won't. They'll stay with white across the board. But man, there's something about the red, white, and blue ropes whenever companies use them. It always looks cool. So we'll start with the main event. The Women's Championship, Roxanne Perez defending against Thea Hale. Hank and Tank were having dumb fun as Roxy prepared, pissing her off, with Jada Parker walking by with a snide comment saying Perez might not have the title when the show was over. Ridge Holland gave Hale a huge pep talk, telling her to do whatever it takes to bring home gold. Andre Chase didn't seem to love that suggestion. And this was a worthy main event. Perez disrespected Hale after a run eating a world's smallest slam, but avoiding a bottom rope springboard senton. Roxy taunted Chase Yone to tope suicida for it, followed by a Michinoku driver. Thea countered Pop Rocks into a backslide for a false finish. Then she got Roxy in the Kimura lock, countered into a crossface, countered back into a Kimura, and then back into a crossface. Hale fully powered out into a rolling senton and a springboard senton. Perez pulled up the ring apron, giving her an opening to eye poke behind the referee's back. She followed with a back suplex, but got dodged into the ring post and put in the Kimura again before they both rolled out of the ring with Roxy slamming Thea into the steel steps. They went right back to crossface, Kimura, crossface, but as Thea was about to grab the rope, Roxy sprung herself off of it, standing Hale up for Pop Rocks and the title retention. And folks, what was an absolute freaking
Banger.
easily the match of Thea's career. Roxy was superb as usual. This probably hit the absolute ceiling for what these two could do, just given Hale's inexperience. But the fact that she went toe-to-toe with Perez to this degree really just shows her potential is sky high. I will remind you, she is 20 years old. Remember I said last week, this was the youngest major title match in WWE history. The average age was 21. The combined age was 42. It was better than anything we got on Raw, including Gunther against Finn Balor, circumstantially, of course, but nevertheless accurate. 4 stars, A- here. And if you told me you had it higher, I would not argue with you one bit. WWE Women's Tag Team Championship, Unholy Union against Metaphor. The champions attacked during match introductions and obliterated Lash Legend into the barricade. She got a huge hot tag run, overpowering both heels, hitting an excellent Uranagi. The challengers combined for a lifted cutter, but Lash got taken out with a Meteora from Isla Dawn. Jakara Jackson then took a super kick and the tandem Gory Bomb flatliner finisher for the title retention in 12 minutes. This was the NXT opener, and it was as long as the Raw main event. Lash looked great when she was featured. Jakara, she still has some work to do, but they gel well together as a team. Successful start to the show, with Unholy Union getting at least a second title defense before SmackDown this coming Friday. We will see what happens there. Ethan Page interrupted the post-match to confront Oro Mensah. He missed a belt shot, so Oro rolled him up, and both Metaphor ladies counted 1, 2, 3. Page, of course, lost his mind again. We later got a contract signing between both of them in Ava's office, with Mensah saying he worked Page into giving him the title match because his ego couldn't handle getting counted 1, 2, 3 multiple times. Oro said he had no respect for Ethan, and his title would fit nicely around his waist. This was a smooth segment between the two, but it wasn't notable in terms of quality, promos, really anything. Pete Dunne got a promo package saying he's been in the business 18 years despite only being 30. He called wrestlers who can't handle setbacks pathetic before branding himself YXB, young and bitter. He said the first time he turned to someone for advice was Sheamus, and all it got him was the terrible Butch nickname while he played second fiddle. Dunn said Sheamus went home, Ridge Holland ran away when things got tough, and Tyler Bate is now injured, so he's all by himself. He recalled being jumped on a bus in London on his way to a show with no one helping him. Yet he said, by contrast, Trick Williams can't even handle losing his title. He can't trust his instincts. They're going to be fighting next week. This was awesome. First time we've truly gotten the done from NXT UK on the main roster or even NXT United States. And the YXB moniker works so well because Bitter has always been part of his character, Bitter End obviously being his finisher. He has a clear direction and purpose that tied together his NXT career with his debut on the main roster, and there's every reason to believe in this guy now. Strange that they debuted the new gimmick on NXT when he's been working it across Raw just the same, but I'm not sure it would have gotten the same 2 minutes on Raw. Hopefully they air a version of this Monday night, and hopefully he beats Trick next week, because if not, the change is all for naught right off the bat. Joe Hendry backstage was making a few women laugh. When he left, Ashante the Adonis came in, put his arms around them, and they all decided to watch the concert together. His concert opened hour 2 of NXT. He called Booker T, pictured in a kilt and Scottish hat, the president of his fan club, and he compared Joe Coffey physically to Dutch Mantel before talking about hating Gallus. Booker T had a laugh riot when he compared him to Dutch Mantel, and I thought it was hysterical. Just those 2 lines were really the entire concert, but both of them hit individually. Fans chanted, "We believe," so he was set for an encore when Gallus obviously interrupted. They got the most heat they have in their entire WWE careers. I'm talking NXT UK, NXT United States. It was crazy. Hendry slugged Coffey, immediately got beat down 1-on-3, eating a guitar shot to the back as they stood tall over him. Hendry was great. Gallus getting that much heat was cool, just given how long they have struggled to draw any reactions in the United States. It also made sense that no one was out to save Hendry because he's a TNA talent. He hasn't made any notable friends in NXT besides Trick, who was dealing with his own shit. Hendry later cut a promo in the NXT parking lot saying the night was a milestone in his career and Gallus was just jealous of him. He was convinced he could hang with the best in the world, leading to a challenge next week. Now, we'll talk about that match in a moment. But what the hell happened to the NXT parking lot? This is like a month straight where people are having conversations and cutting promos out there without a care in the world. Nothing happening to them. I guess Ava got some security, maybe some floodlights or something, because this is like the safest part of NXT right now, and it used to be the most dangerous for really the entirety of the brand's history. Javon Evans also got a promo package saying WWE was the one thing that brought his family together even as his parents got divorced. He said Jeff Hardy and Rob Van Dam were heroes, and in school, he got in trouble for telling teachers to suck it and wrestling with friends. Remember we recently spoke about Evans slowing down his speech, that way he could continue speaking naturally, yet come across clearer through the screen? That's exactly what he did here. You could feel the energy and the excitement radiating off this kid. And he just has one of those electric smiles and personalities where you perk up immediately listening to him and you want to root for him to succeed. That's just natural babyface energy. This accomplished a lot on the way to making him relatable to the fans as a person and a character beyond his athleticism. And this was just part 1. We're going to get part 2 of this next week. The Rascals gathered in their treehouse with Wesley, confused given it was a Tuesday, not a Thursday when this normally happens on TNA wrestling. They were all giddy about getting back together, with the TNA guys kind of wanting to toke up, but Wes saying it's kind of PG around here in NXT. MSK decided they deserve a title shot, given they never lost the NXT titles, and Zach Wentz pinned Axiom last week. So as Wes texted to get the match made, they turned off the cameras one by one so that they could smoke. The PG reference was funny, slightly odd, because they alluded to weed so many times back when MSK was a thing, and that was pre-Paul Levesque when things are opening up a little bit, but they probably just wanted to differentiate the shows a little bit. This was the exact booking I hoped we would get last week, and the guys individually had a lot of fun here. Super entertaining segment as usual with all 3. Later in the show, Axiom was talking to LWO about his forthcoming speed match. When Nathan Frazier walked in and got a bit ignored, Robert Stone and Stevie Turner came up with a tag team title contract. Axiom signed it without even looking at it. Frazier was bothered by it, given Axiom wasn't paying attention, and obviously got pinned in the 6-man last week. So they're still doing that, development of the tag team personality. There's friction, but they're still together and successful. Whatever. The best news is we got the match we wanted next week.
That's going to be a banger.
The Heritage Cup was on the line. Tony D'Angelo defending against Tavian Heights. Hank and Tank did 80s style backstage interviews before the match while training. Heights, wearing his Team USA Olympic jacket from 2020, recalled that he was wrestling in the Summer Games 3 years ago before winning major medals in international championships. He also put over D'Angelo's wrestling credentials, saying he was ready for the challenge. Tony then put Tavian over as a legit tough guy, just given his amateur success. There was dual heel hook to end round one. The camera panned to Ren Sinclair in the crowd cheering for NQCC. No fall in round two that ended in a superplex. D'Angelo hit forget about it early in round three for the first fall. Sinclair jumps over the barricade, shoves Miles Bourne aside, slaps the shit out of Heights right across the face 2 times to get his mind right. So he exploded out of the corner in the next round, hit a running belly-to-belly suplex for another quick fall that evened it at 1-1. But NQCC, they were too busy talking to Ren ringside to help Tavian during the break between rounds. So D'Angelo ultimately hit 2 spinebusters and he retained the cup. Would have been cool to see a major upset just for kind of shits and giggles, but this was more entertaining than expected given Ren's inclusion and how the match transpired. Heights has the size, he has some natural skill. He just needs to develop as an overall wrestler and personality. Jada Parker fought Kendall Gray. Bourne and Sinclair came down to shit talk Carly Bright after last week. So Gray again grabbed him for the double arm toss suplex ringside. Then she hit Parker with a big slam, but Jada came back in the ring with her rear drop, a front suplex, and Hypnotic for the win. Straight up apples to apples, Gray was more impressive in this match than Bright has been in months. Her moveset was more extensive, she was far more fluid, and she sold better. Jada was obviously excellent because she's the truth and has as high a ceiling as any woman in NXT right now. Surprisingly fun match. Not totally sure where the stuff with Bourne is going exactly, but I guess Sinclair is going to feud with Gray and Bright. Maybe they do a mixed tag team match. That would make a lot of sense. I don't know what guy would pair with them, so that's the one confusion. Parker, it seems like she might be getting built up as a challenger for Perez. I mean, she really should be going after the North American Championship, but if they're not going to use Julia or Vaquer for No Mercy, then it's possible that Parker challenges Perez for that show, or maybe they do a TV title match before that. Sol Ruca, Lola Vice, and Carmen Petrovic fought Fallon Henley, JC Jane, and Jasmine Nix. This further developed through social media over the last week. Sol hit Fallon with an X Factor, then surfed on her back. Petrovic murdered Nix with a kick to the chest. Ruca hit a sky twister into the heels waiting outside. It was kind of a holy shit moment. Then she did a springboard 540 double clothesline that half missed as the faces did a triple ass shake hip attack. Sol added a powerbomb on Fallon, but took a draping cutter off the top rope by JC, plus a fisherman suplex bridge by Jasmine. Petrovic got caught with a Pele kick by Nix, a spinning forearm by Jane, and a fisherman-style lifted cutter by Henley, a new finisher that she debuted for the expected heel victory. The amount of young talent on display in this match was legitimately wild. This over-delivered to such a high degree, I was legitimately shocked watching it. Sol was the star. Lola might have put on her best display in an individual match that I can remember outside of NXT Underground. Carmen was shot out of a cannon. Plus, Fallon finally got a finisher after years of the Shining Wizard that didn't even have a name. The heels winning was appropriate for their characters in the story. I may dislike this entire rookie gimmick, which becomes more nonsensical by the week, but this shit banged. 3.5 stars B. Again, I might be underselling this a little bit. Tatum Paxley approached Kalani Jordan backstage, holding her doll, wanting to play. Jordan said she didn't want to play with her or the dolls, and then Wendy Chu creepily walked up behind them and scared Lonnie. Paxley said that she wanted to play with her title now. We've expected this match to come sooner than later, though it would have been ideal if Tatum got another couple wins first. That way she could fully earn the opportunity. Alas. Cedric Alexander told a bunch of rookies backstage that he and Trick Williams are good. Sean Spears interrupted, now shirtless, in a suit jacket with the arms cut off. Seriously, what is with this dude's wardrobe? Who is dressing him? He said Cedric has no wisdom to share since Trick ignored him and then beat him. Spears pointed out that he, on the other hand, is making a difference in Brooks Jensen's life and career, calling Alexander a lost cause. He suggested Jensen has a weak mind. Alexander did, I should say. And that was why he was easily influenced. That led to Jensen storming at him and a match getting made. So we had Alexander against Jensen. Spears joined ringside. Cedric went on a run with a catch Michinoku driver. Brooks gave him a chop to the throat, a flying leg drop, and a gourd buster over the announce table. But Alexander dodged a flying spin kick with Jensen drilling the edge of the table. Then he hit lumbar check for the win. This was Cedric Alexander's first singles victory on American television since November 2021. Nearly 3 effing years. Could have sworn this was just going to be used to push Jensen's progress with Cedric eating a pin. So I was super pleased to have my pessimism discounted. Ced looked good in the ring. The lumbar check still hit hard. The only thing missing is the entrance theme.
In the dark, I feel it home. Time has passed and now I've grown. Used to dream I'd have it all. Now it's mine, I won't let go. In the dark, I feel it home. Time has passed and now I've grown. Used to dream I'd have it all. Now it's mine, I won't let go.
Man, bring that shit back and push Cedric Alexander. You guys know I'm biased, but still, I want to see my boy get pushed here. Even with the booking, the loss was actually beneficial for Jensen, given he's actively being taught by Spears. You can't just go with someone and win all of your matches immediately. That wouldn't really make sense. I was immensely pleased at how this played out in totality. So that wraps up NXT for this week, just like we did last week. Let's take a look at NXT Great American Bash Night 2. And this is almost a premium live event card. I mean, it is legitimately stacked. The NXT title is going to be on the line. Ethan Page against Oro Mensah. We know Page will retain there. Trick Williams against Pete Dunne in a singles match. Legitimately don't know which way this is going to go. I hope Dunne wins, even if he has to cheat and do some heel antics. Dunne over Trick would be the right decision. Trick is nowhere near ready for a call-up. He can stand to lose a couple matches, especially to the second longest, I believe, reigning NXT UK champion. Tag team championship on the line. Nathan Frazier and Axiom against MSK. This one is super, super interesting. It does make sense to change this title. Get it on NXT and TNA. Would be a really unique scenario to have it defended across 2 different shows. One champion employed by WWE, the other one employed by TNA. They could always drop it right back to Fraxium at No Mercy. You can't have 6 title matches across 2 shows and 0 changes. So I'm kind of thinking this might happen. MSK may win this match. You have Joe Hendry against Joe Coffey. Should be a win for Hendry. And then the Women's North American Championship, Kalani Jordan defending against Tatum Paxley, which should be a Lonnie retention. As much as I want Paxley pushed, and I'd be totally fine if she won, I just don't think they're ready to do that right now. NXT this week, a super entertaining episode. I mean, they have bounced back recently. We've been talking about it from some 2024 lows, kind of coming out of the last few months. The WWE draft took a lot of talent. They really struggled to find their footing again. Even with the men's singles division, it's still not 100% all the way there, but the women absolutely carried this show, did a fantastic job, and it's going to be the men's turn next week to prove that they're up to the challenge. So folks, with that, let's go ahead and move over to AEW. When it comes to AEW this week, I had to watch all 6 hours consecutively on Wednesday. I tried my best to be comprehensive for the weekend shows while simultaneously not going long. Rampage was the best show of the weekend for a change, simply because it had pretty much one match, the Royal Rampage, which featured stakes and a bunch of talent involved. It also, like I said, took most of the show. Collision was a shit show unless you're into hologram, and Battle of the Belts was rough from the standpoint that it only had one ROH title on the line, and none of the 3 matches were built at all. As far as Dynamite goes, stay with me here. It was the worst Dynamite of the last month. That doesn't mean it was a bad episode, but it was a step down from the prior 3 that we praised pretty heavily here. If all of those were somewhere between A- and A, this was like a B- episode is pretty much what I'm trying to say. Not bad, just nothing super entertaining. The middle show segment and the main event were both worth your time. The rest of the show was mostly a shrug. I actually got a tweet about watching 6 straight hours of AEW. It was from Mr. Wrestling LXIX, same name and handle. He said, "Do you feel like watching 6 hours of AEW in one sitting affects the way you feel about it?" And here's the answer. Watching 4 hours of AEW that is not Dynamite actually had me looking more forward to Dynamite because I wanted to watch some quality wrestling. And unfortunately, the show didn't deliver like the other weeks had. So if there was ever a week to watch 6 hours of AEW straight consecutively, this was not necessarily the week to do it. it made it for a very rough day. I also, similarly, I couldn't imagine watching 5 straight hours of WWE if it was main roster, Raw, and SmackDown, especially the last couple of weeks where the episodes have frustrated me. Now, if I watch 7 straight hours of WWE with NXT as like a palate cleanser between Raw and SmackDown, I could probably get through that. But I think watching 6 straight hours of wrestling television, no matter the company, is a tough ask. Like I said, I did the absolute best I could. Now, in terms of actual storyline relevant matches, fortunately, it was also a significant downturn from last week. Just 4 of 21 matches across 6 hours of television were storyline relevant. And I'm actually being generous on one of them. That's 19%, which may well be an all-time low. And it's way lower than I think last week AEW may have been around like 40%, and I was praising that. It was an extremely poor creative week across the board when it came to the wrestling aspect. Now, a decent amount has been announced for this coming week. So hopefully this is an aberration, but it certainly was not heading in the right direction. That is clear. On Rampage, Lance Archer beat a jobber named Alejandro in 1 minute. Then on Collision, he beat a jobber named GKM, also in 1 minute. And sorry, Dustin Rhodes, I'm going to refer to actual jobbers as jobbers. Like, it's not a offensive term. These accomplished absolutely nothing. Then Archer beat up a bunch of randoms backstage saying things would change in AEW. Then we were shown a New Japan highlight of Archer fighting Will Ospreay last year. So that match was made on Dynamite. For real, that was the booking effort here. So on Dynamite, MJF opened the show wearing a red eagle-adorned jacket. He got some local cheap heat and called Will Ospreay a redcoat terrorist, promising to beat him again. Let me repeat, MJF was literally wearing a red coat himself. Should have just worn blue. Ospreay interrupted with MJF hightailing it to the stage. He got turned around a bit in this promo, Ospreay did, but he was trying to say fans don't acknowledge MJF's renamed title because he's a piece of shit. Then Ospreay put over all the former international champions. He said they're all workhorses, claiming MJF isn't worthy of the title. So then fans chanted USA for some reason, but Ospreay said MJF didn't have the American work ethic that they did. MJF then introduced Archer. This was fine. The intention is to have a red-hot feud, but as I stated last week, the entire nationalism aspect has completely detracted from the actual heat, which was MJF cheating to beat Ospreay at the end of an hour-long match and stealing his title. It's almost like that never happened, or like it doesn't matter anymore, because MJF is instead playing an American asshole, but he's an American asshole who only represents Long Island and hates the rest of the country. So, like, what sense does that even make? It's just convoluted as fuck. So let's go to the match. We had Ospreay against Archer. Ospreay was overpowered and dominated for most of the match before countering an avalanche chokeslam into a Spanish fly. He hit the Oz Cutter coming back, but Archer countered Hidden Blade with a lariat. Ospreay then countered Blackout into Tornado DDT, and he hit Hidden Blade for a 1 count. So Will hit another one and got the win. So this guy in Archer, who loses every feud and hasn't beaten anyone of value in literal years, kicks out of Ospreay's finisher in a thrown together match. Just totally dumb. So MJF attacked from behind immediately after the bell. He had a brainbuster. He split his jacket in half, by the way. Then he put on the Dynamite Diamond ring with Kyle Fletcher saving alongside Don Callis. He said he knows Ospreay is no longer in the family, but he's his best friend. He wants to make MJF pay. Then, eye roll, he said AEW is where the best wrestle, and he wants to fight MJF. MJF acted like he was coming down, only to, of course, deny the match until next week's Dynamite. He said he'd kangaroo kick his ass and break his neck just like Daniel Garcia. Fletcher's promo was longer and perhaps better than Ospreay's. That's a tough apples to apples comparison right there. MJF's retort to Fletcher was probably better than what he said to open the show as well. Callis said nothing. He did shake his head off camera as Ospreay thanked Fletcher. There would ideally be a backstage segment this week, or there would have been this week. Ideally, there will be next week with him telling Kyle, this isn't acceptable. It flies in the face of the agreement we made just a few weeks ago. Also, the idea that Ospreay, a mega babyface, has no friends outside of the family is ridiculous. Remember, I said the same thing about Cody Rhodes a couple of weeks ago. Ospreay's this guy. He's bringing the company along. Everyone's getting behind him, and no one saves him from MJF. All the people who hate MJF backstage, no one is willing to help Will Ospreay. It's stupid. On Rampage, we had the Royal Rampage match. This was for an AEW title shot at Grand Slam. There was a nice and strong assortment of talent in this, and you'll remember it features 2 rings coming off Blood and Guts. Jeff Jarrett got a strong initial pop. I cannot believe he's successfully a face now. Darby Allin and Brody King tried to repeat the spot from like a year ago, but Darby eliminated the big man, leaving Jarrett, Claudio Castagnoli, and Brian Cage. That made the winner pretty freaking obvious. Hangman Page interfered, costing Jarrett. Claudio hit Cage with neutralizer on the ring apron, then threw Darby across both rings with him rolling outside. Claudio swung him into the steel steps, but Allin eventually eliminated him with a draping coffin drop. Then Claudio refused to shake hands. The match went 38 minutes. It was extremely solid, 3.5 stars and a B. With Grand Slam going down September 25th, it's obviously possible Darby winds up fighting Bryan Danielson instead of Swerve Strickland. Though remember, that build for Swerve Darby oddly started before Blood and Guts. As we discussed last week, it was so strange that they did that backstage segment. Bryan Darby would be a lot of fun, and pushing him with Sting gone is a good call because he's still super over on his own. So I liked Darby getting this moment. The other thing, though, that was frustrating coming out of this is you had Hangman take out Jarrett on Rampage, and there was zero follow-up to that on Dynamite. I know that it stemmed from Blood and Guts, but you don't just forget that happened when this guy eliminates you from a Royal Rampage match for a number 1 contendership. They just didn't follow up at all. So on Dynamite, Bryan came out for the crossover segment from 8 to 9, saying he has been present during his latest run in his career, able to soak in all the fun he's having. It is so fun being in AEW, guys. He showed goosebumps like The Rock and got a thank you, Bryan chant. Then Danielson reminded that he promised his family that his first AEW contract would be his last wrestling contract. And that deal ends tomorrow, today, August 1st, the day of this podcast episode. Bryan said he promised to kick people's heads in and win the AEW championship when he signed, but he's only fulfilled one of those promises. He definitively said this will be his last shot at the AEW title, and while doctors tell him not to wrestle, he promises to step into Wembley Stadium, give 100%, and go all in. Swerve interrupted, both got chants. He thanked Bryan for inspiring a generation, saying he'd root for him in this journey if it was against anyone else but himself. Swerve said the AEW title is not an achievement award or a retirement gift. It proves you're the best in the world. Swerve reminded Danielson that he lost and got hurt against Ospreay, who he, Swerve, beat. Then he lost Anarchy in the Arena, Bryan did, while Swerve won Blood and Guts. Then he got in his face, promising Bryan will not leave All In as champion, but possibly paralyzed instead. Danielson then promised if he doesn't win the AEW title, he will retire. Not just full-time, but for good, title versus career. They shook hands. Swerve said that's a promise Bryan needs to keep to his family. Jarrett later praised Danielson for going all in and putting it all on the line, but Bryan pushed something out of his hands, got in his face, and said he'd prove he's all in next week. Slightly odd because Jarrett's been on his side the entire time, but if the goal was just to show some focus from Danielson, then that plays. Let's start with the immense positives because Danielson's promo was excellent. Swerve was really strong coming back, and they were top-notch going face-to-face as well. The moment in totality was the best talking segment that AEW has put on TV in a long time, with the gravitas at the end of Danielson's career being on the line, amping it up alongside Swerve's immense confidence. It set the stage for the match nicely. It now gives us something to chew on across multiple weeks. Those are all the positives, and they're mostly positives. Now my problem, the actual title versus career stipulation. Originally going into All In, I was thinking it was 65-35 that Bryan would win the title. Thought it was plausible that he could lose, put Swerve over in a huge main event match, then possibly win the title during a part-time run a year or 2 years from now. But Danielson is not the type of guy to put his career on the line and then go back on that, even if he was going to leave AEW and return to WWE or something. He would say AEW retirement, not career retirement. So what AEW has done here, and maybe I'm wrong, perhaps it's a swerve purely intended to drum up interest, but what AEW has done here is basically tell people, you need to buy tickets to this show and you need to order the pay-per-view because Bryan Danielson is going to win the AEW title. It feels to me like the mystery and suspense has been removed entirely. It doesn't change the segment being tremendous. It doesn't change that the match is going to be fantastic. It's just not what I personally would have done booking it. It also kind of feels a tad desperate, where they're like, you know what? We're not even at 50,000 tickets. Maybe if we promise Danielson's going to win the title, we'll get to 60,000 or something like that. That's just the way I perceived this. On Dynamite, in the main event, Darby fought Hangman. This was a first-time ever match promoted as such from the onset by Tony when he announced it. I very much appreciated that. What I didn't like is that AEW barely mentioned it throughout the entire show. They wound up on the stage with Darby hitting a flip-over cutter before climbing the stage and doing a standing coffin drop. Every arena light except the barricade turned off in a weird, unplanned moment. Page did 3 short-range powerbombs into the ring apron before a fall-away slam into the pointy part of the steel steps. Really nasty spot. Then he did an avalanche fall-away slam. Darby sat Hangman on the steps and did a tope suicida, knocking him off. Another really good spot. Then Darby started beating on him with a belt. Allen hit a code red, but Page caught an attempted coffin drop. Darby tried buckshot lariat himself, but Hangman caught him with a regular lariat. He followed with consecutive dead eyes, but just chose not to cover. Darby eventually rose and collapsed during a buckshot attempt, so Hangman tried to flip him into a lariat, but Darby literally rolled him up for the win. Page threw a fit, throwing chairs into the ring. Darby was already outside, and that was it. Hangman losing was expected. People said they were surprised by this. I thought you could see this finish a mile away once he didn't cover after the second deadeye. It doesn't change the match being really high quality and really exciting as a main event. There were a ton of cool spots. It was the match of the week for AEW at 4 stars A-, no doubt about that. But it did detract from the finish because everything was really trite in that final sequence. A reminder here, Darby was already the second number 1 contender for the AEW title, while simultaneously being the number 1 contender for the TNT title coming into this match. He has 2 title matches ahead. That's why there was no way in hell he was losing here. It also makes you wonder why AEW would make one person a top contender for 2 titles simultaneously, with one of those matches basically being 2 months away. Hangman taking the L wasn't the end of the world, but at the same time, it'd be nice to build him up with some actual wins before he goes after Swerve again, whether that's for the title or not. AEW brought him back in a really sensible way. But now, what exactly is he going to be doing for the next month? Now, that was all the big stuff from AEW this week. Let's talk about everything else. On Collision, FTR beat the M&M Collection, previously Maximum Male Models from WWE, in 12 minutes with Shatter Machine. It took the greatest tag team in the world, quote unquote, 12 minutes to beat these guys. I liked seeing them, just not sure it was really logical. Mansoor and Mason Madden actually debuted in Ring of Honor with a pre-show victory. Basically, the shtick is identical, but again, I'm glad they're getting work. Probably better as an ROH gimmick, all things considered. If FTR is supposed to be built as number 1 contenders, they need to be fighting and beating legitimate established teams. On Collision, Acclaimed cut a passionate promo taped after Dynamite about how they always deliver and they just protected AEW from the Elite. Really, it was Anthony Bowens who started in this segment. Max Caster said they were ready for their title shot, then called out FTR for not actually competing in Blood and Guts. Giving these guys a serious turn is long overdue. And if this promo translates through their in-ring presentation and future promos, that's going to be a massive positive. My thought coming out of this, you got to get rid of Billy Gunn just for this to truly work. So then on Dynamite, Billy Gunn started a trio promo saying they will be on Collision this week. Caster kept calling himself the best wrestler alive. He called out FTR, wondering why they weren't there since they're locals, where the show was in South Carolina. If the Collision promo was an 8 out of 10 or an 8.5 out of 10, this was like a 5 out of 10. But at least they actually built something for Saturday. On Dynamite, Camille squashed a jobber in 1 minute. She did a leg lariat and won with a seated front slam. Camille is being nicknamed the Brick House, which is legitimately terrible. The term is brick shit house, but they obviously didn't want to say shit in a nickname. So what you do is you choose a different nickname. But this reminded me of New Catch Republic in WWE. Brick House sounds like an American restaurant that serves burgers and craft pizza and towers of beer. I bet you within a 50-mile radius of where you live, you have a restaurant called the Brick House. This was a rare second women's match on Dynamite, but it was obviously just an entree for Mercedes to cut a promo. She claimed Camille is the newest member of Money Corporation. Then she said Britt Baker is jealous of her and got suspended by the EVPs for attacking her at Comic-Con. The promo was okay for a Mercedes promo, but she fumbled her words a few times as usual. Not a great segment. On Rampage, Chris Statlander beat Layla Gray in 1 minute. Waste of time. Only women's match on the entire show. Before this, Willow Nightingale did cut a promo agreeing to that absurd Eliminator challenge. On Collision, Thunder Rosa beat someone named Maya World in 3 minutes. The only women's match on the show. Nothing of relevance for the division on Rampage or Collision. On Collision, Orange Cassidy beat Johnny TV in 10 minutes. No reason for this happening. Johnny and Taya Valkyrie attacked after the bell, leading to a Willow save. Nightingale later cut a promo backstage explaining that she's already involved in another Eliminator match before Statlander. On Collision, the conglomeration beat the Premier Athletes in 10 minutes. Before the match, Mark Briscoe had a fun promo where he had Kyle O'Reilly hold his baby, the ROH title. So Kyle tossed it and bounced it like it was a child. But then Briscoe brought in an actual baby, I guess one of his kids, on screen as the newest member of the group. The promo from Briscoe was better than the entire match, which just happened. O'Reilly got the win with an armbar, so at least he picked up a dub for a change. On Battle of the Belts, Toni Storm beat Taya in an eliminator match. Why? Because Storm had her hair slicked back with a different look. She kicked out of a Glam Slam finisher, by the way, and then won with Storm Zero. Valkyrie got way too much here. Toni cut a promo after the bell saying Mariah May was a dream, but she made a mistake not cutting her head off and taking her out for good. So Storm's first words to May came on Battle of the Belts. The crowd strangely gave her the LA Knight treatment, like they were bored during her promo. But as soon as she stopped talking, they loudly cheered for her. Just really weird. On Dynamite, Mariah sat down for an interview with Renee where she sat back casually with her feet up. May said Storm never did anything wrong, and she loved that she gave her an opportunity, but it was also an opening for her to eat. 2 questions, interview over. What Mariah said was good, but it was unnecessarily short. That's why I praised that Thea Hale interview on NXT a few weeks ago, because it was actually a real interview. Storm followed by coming out on stage with her eyebrows painted all weird, saying she loved May and it would be a romance of a lifetime at All In. She hit herself in the head with a shoe and looked completely psychotic, but not in a good way. This whole thing was ridiculous. On Battle of the Belts, Willow beat Deonna Purrazzo in a CMLL eliminator match. Why? Because Taya came down late in the match. AEW really got their money's worth using her 3 times on Saturday. Rosa stopped her from handing Deonna a turnbuckle wrench, which distracted Purrazzo, leading to a pounce and a Dr. Bomb victory. On one hand, positive there were 2 women's matches on the same show. On the other, 0 effort was put into their booking, and neither of them made sense as eliminators. On Dynamite, we had the other planned CMLL eliminator that should have been a title match, Willow against Stat. Nightingale hit a Death Valley driver on the apron, then grabbed Stokely Hathaway's lapels. Distracting herself for no reason, she ate a lariat from Stat. She came back with a 450. That was a 3.1 count, but ruled a 2.9. Stoke handed Stat a chain, then distracted the referee, trying to rip off a turnbuckle pad. Stat nailed Willow with the chain, and hit a discus lariat for the 1-2-3 to earn a CMLL title shot that she should have and could have gotten without even doing an eliminator. Stat followed with 2 chair shots and then took out 3 tiny security guards. I enjoy the overall storyline between these two, but it just kind of seems to be moving in place. And unfortunately, this match was nothing. Also, Willow Nightingale is the babyface of all babyfaces. And no one, not a single person, woman or man from backstage, ran out to help her. What about her new friendship with Orange, who she literally saved from further attack just days earlier? He doesn't repay the favor. No one from Conglomeration gets her back. Hopefully, one way or another, this gets some type of extreme stipulation at All In. But again, the logic gap is just so freaking frustrating. On Collision, Hologram beat the Beast Mortos in 12 minutes, a more legitimate opponent than last week, obviously. Tony Schiavone told us 5 times to listen to the fans because he's never heard a response like the one Hologram is getting. Schiavone, who called every episode of WCW Nitro and almost every episode of AEW Dynamite, has never heard a response like Hologram got from 400 people in an esports arena. Mortos hit a seated cradle slam off the ropes, really cool move. The referee appropriately refused to count because he was only touching the legs, not the chest. They botched a Hurricanrana into a Canadian destroyer on the apron. Hologram won with a flying crucifix bomb that needed a lot of help from Mortos to happen, and then a pinning combination. 3.75 stars, B+, super entertaining from bell to bell. I want you to remember that Mortos lost this match. We'll come back to it. At Battle of the Belts, the vacant ROH 6-man titles were on the line. Dustin Rhodes and the Von Erichs against Undisputed Kingdom. I wonder who won this. So this match involved a team that only wrestled together once against another that is already the ROH Tag Team Champions for titles that should have been merged with the AEW Trio straps, but they were only unified, and therefore they became available once Christopher Daniels stripped Bang Bang Gang. Oh, and Paul White was on commentary too. You got it? Cool. Dustin took a cowbell to the head, but kicked out. Katsuyori Shibata came down for no reason in the moment and did a stereo iron claw with Kevin Von Erich, who was ringside. Then Dustin hit the twisting neckbreaker for the victory. The pop was legitimately huge, just given the scale of the building. Kevin rolled into the ring with the titles for his boys. Streamers came out. White left commentary. Some baby faces came out to celebrate an ROH six-man title win. Then we learned, well after the fact, Shibata helped train the Von Erich boys in Pro Wrestling Noah. So that was the connection. So what AEW did was illogically strip Bang Bang Gang of the titles so they could separate them out to give the Von Erichs a title run and gain some PR with hardcore wrestling fans while doing a residency in Texas. Cool for the boys and Kevin, I am sure. Definitely a great moment for the crowd that had a blast at the conclusion of the match. I'm just saying it was super transparent what they were doing here. On Rampage, Kyle Fletcher and Roosh beat Private Party, the Outrunners, and the Righteous in a random-ass four-way. Match was awful with an obvious winning team. Then Roosh beat and choked an Outrunner with a cord for no reason after the bell. I guess Roosh is officially with Callis. He was being recruited, but it was never actually confirmed that he agreed to join the family. And then I guess LFI is now gone. Should they just let that disappear? Okay. On Dynamite, Orange Cassidy, Briscoe, and Tomohiro Ishii fought Roderick Strong, Roosh, and Mortos. This started with Orange becoming a fucking matador. He used his jacket to treat Mortos like a bull, for real. Orange hit a DDT, Briscoe hit a froggy bow, tagging was non-existent. Strong hit Ishii with an Olympic slam and a tiger driver. Strong took an orange punch. Then Briscoe had Mortos ready for a J Driller, only to eat a headbutt from Roosh, and then a cradle pile driver with Mortos pinning the ROH champion. Let me remind you, he just lost a hologram. Now he's pinning the ROH champion. Cameras cut to the faces after the bell. They were smiling, which should not have been on screen. Credit where it's due for a surprise finish. I definitely did not see that coming. And we've been talking about a lot of predictability from AEW matches. Didn't see this coming. But this was a mix of Vince McMahon's repetitive booking with Tony Khan's random booking. The same general match idea that we've seen in terms of conglomeration against Undisputed Kingdom, with totally a random assortment of people thrown into it for no storyline reason. Neither Roosh nor Mortos has interacted with them or each other. Callis presumably put Roosh in because Trent hates Orange. Trent's not even on TV these days. I went back thinking this was part of the promo from Collision. It wasn't. So whatever. On Collision, Chris Jericho, in a promo taped after Dynamite, sold a broken finger. He put over Minoru Suzuki and told Shibata that the learning tree is now focused on him. On Dynamite, Big Bill gave Jericho a cake celebrating 102 days as champion. Jericho promised the cake wouldn't get smashed like it always does in wrestling, and he reminded Shibata that he's all alone. The best part was the cake being kind of shoved into Alex Marvez's hands, and it didn't get smashed. So there you go. On Battle of the Belts, Kip Sabian cut a promo saying he wants to honor his family and his father by being the best wrestler in AEW. Everyone just wants to be the best wrestler. That's what AEW is about. He said he let go of the patriarchy, but Nick Wayne got in his face. Then he quoted Eric Bischoff's entrance theme for some reason, saying he's back and better than ever. So Kip is going to fight and lose to Nick. Okay. On Collision, Pac beat Leo Rush in 13 minutes, exactly what you would expect from these two. Pac took a poison rana and a basement springboard cutter. He kind of got knees up for a frog splash. Then he won via submission with the brutalizer. Pac also should have taken a 3 count on a failed kick out, but he didn't. On Collision, Claudio and Wheeler Yuta beat Cage and Lee Moriarty and also Top Flight in a triple threat. Why? Because why was Cage teaming with some random person from a different group outside of his own group that he just established? I could not tell you. Yuta pinned Moriarty, who beat him for the ROH Pure title days earlier with the seatbelt. So they changed the title, and then they had the new champion, largely an AEW jobber over his career, take a fall immediately. So that should lead to a direct rematch, I guess. On Collision, Bang Bang Gang cut a promo with Juice Robinson angry at Shayna Wayne, promising to take down the patriarchy. Austin Gunn was covered in glitter for some reason. No specific challenge or anything was laid out. And lastly, on Rampage, Saraya and Harley Cameron again complained about the former not being part of All In. So Saraya said that she would get back in the ring next week. That way she gets a spot at Wembley Stadium. Repetitive without a reason. I have absolutely no idea what kind of match she would have at Wembley Stadium. Both women's titles have challengers. Are they going to do a number one contendership type of match? I mean, ideally there would be a third women's match on the show. Oh, the third women's match might be Chris Statlander and Willow Nightingale. So are they going to do a fourth women's match on the show? I mean, that would be great. But what is it going to be? I mean, maybe a battle royal? I don't know. I guess we will find out. So folks, that wraps up AEW this week. As mentioned at the start, Collision, Battle of the Belts, pretty terrible. Royal Rampage was really good. I would actually go and suggest watching that match. And then Dynamite, the middle of the show and the main event were absolutely fantastic. The rest of the show, give or take. For those of you who like to have a ratings conversation, all shows are going up against the Olympics, so there's only so much to really note. Collision, Battle of the Belts, and Rampage all did low numbers. NXT did its second lowest number ever. It was not only against the Olympics, specifically Simone Biles and Katie Ledecky, but it was also on a different channel. So Sci-Fi is in way fewer homes than USA Network, and it was going against Olympic competition on both NBC and USA Network, literally stations owned by the same company. So it did its second lowest rating ever. Not a surprise, but again, the channel had a lot to do with that. AEW Dynamite, I'm just seeing the rating come in literally as we're finishing up this episode. It did 609,000 viewers and a 0.18 demo. Again, legitimate Olympic competition, so you cannot discount that, but it was on its normal channel and night. It was the second time they've done under 610,000 since June 19th. Obviously, that really low episode, that was 502 and 0.16. If you discount that outlier, then it's the lowest rated edition with the lowest demo for AEW Dynamite on its regular nighttime and channel in years. I mean, scrolling as I'm talking, I can't even find the date, but it's the same as what it was, back in June when we talked about that number being the lowest since whatever that date was. So, a notably bad rating, I would say, for Dynamite, worse for Dynamite than respectively NXT, Collision, Dynamite, and Battle of the Belts. But again, with Olympics, there is legitimate competition. It's interesting though, because a lot of people are watching this primetime Olympic show, but it's actually not live. Nothing that's happening is live. And NBC is pretty much doing a very similar bit of coverage around like 2:30 to 5 p.m. every single day, where you can watch all the events live. So it is Olympic competition. It's not the same as live Olympic competition. And yet it has affected every single show. Obviously, Raw on Monday night had a very low rating. But again, Raw and NXT are on a different channel that is available to far fewer people. Whereas with Dynamite here, it's the second lowest rating in years, multiple years at their regular nighttime and channel. And it was on the regular station at the regular time. So not great, but we will see once the Olympics end, not next week, 2 weeks from now, whether they are able to bounce back ahead of AEW All In. That wraps up this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. Of course, let me remind you, we have a WWE SummerSlam Ultimate Preview already in the feed. Make sure you listen to that before Saturday's show. And Saturday, as soon as WWE SummerSlam goes off the air, we will have an instant analysis podcast in the feed. Make sure you hit that Saturday or Sunday morning. Of course, you can listen to it at any time before Tuesday's WWE show. Reminders here on the way out, the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
It's all about the five.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify, leave a 5-star rating on Apple, take a little extra time, leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast and follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. You can also send in questions and comments for the show and vote in our pre- and post-show polls surrounding WWE SummerSlam. Please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well, for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. Bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions for every major show, plus exclusive news posts on Friday. And by the way, you can visit our Twitter profile at Getting Overcast. We have a link tree with links to every single thing that we have, be it podcast feeds, YouTube channel, WWE shop. If you're ever going to buy anything from WWE, you can get a portion. That would be awesome. Please support the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. That's the point that we are here to make. I appreciate all of you listening to this edition of the program. We will be back Saturday with our third and final episode of the week. It is officially time for the Silver King to sign off and leave you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.